All right, welcome to episode 4 of the All American Hoops podcast. I'm Chris Driscoll. I'm joined, just like last time, by my younger brother Matt.
Hey, Chris, it's an honor to be on the first emergency pod for All
Exactly,
American
and
Hoops.
then I'm also joined by a family friend, John Cassidy, who is also a diehard Knicks fan.
I would say most notably a two-time 98.7 ESPN radio call-in from John from JFK. But as Matt also said, grateful to be on the first emergency pod, and even more grateful that they're about my New York Knicks.
Absolutely. Based on the way that this is set up, I did wear my New York Mets T-shirt in honor of this, and what I also have on is my New York Knicks hat, actually, which I didn't bring up in our pre-show. But just a little story about that, actually. On Christmas a couple years ago, my mother brought me this hat, thinking it was a New York Mets hat, but it is a New York Knicks hat, which is pretty cool. I wear it out sometimes, but I was going to wear it on the pod, but then it would get distracted with the headphones, so decided against it. But I'm sure for those of you who follow the NBA know the reason why we're putting on this emergency pod for the Knicks. But the Knicks traded Immanuel, Quickley, RJ Barrett, and a second-round pick for OG Anunoby, Precious Achiuwa, and how do you say his name? I don't even say his name. Malachi. I've had a couple of conversations with Knicks fans, but first, John, before you give your take on the trade, I just want to know, how are you doing personally?
It's a part of how I feel about the trade. There's a basketball side, like there is to every trade, and maybe the most emotional trade I've ever had to go through. Twofold, which I'll get into, but mainly it just feels like a big Band-Aid in a sense being ripped off. I don't like that there weren't any inklings of this. I would have very much enjoyed to be prepared. I've liked these kids for a while. They were the closest thing that, as a 27-year-old, I've had two children. And it really just kind of beats you up a little bit. But again, we'll get into it a little bit more. There's obviously a basketball side about this that I like to agree with, but at least in the aftermath, it's a tough pill to swallow.
That's for sure. That's how trades are. Every trade where a player's been on the team for multiple years, it's going to be pretty gut wrenching for sure. Obviously, Matt and I are Celtics fans. We've dealt with this before. We dealt with it in the Isaiah Thomas trade in 2017. We dealt with it with Marcus Smart's this past offseason. The Isaiah trade didn't work out like how we like to, but however, I still consider the Celtics winners of that trade because they got more out of it. I think the winner of the Marcus Smart trade is to be determined, but it's looking pretty good so far. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure if the Knicks are going to feel the same way, but that should be interesting. Matt, what are your takeaways on that?
Obviously, like you said, I'm a Celtics fan, so I don't have the emotional connection that John has to these players. But from an outsider looking in, I think it was time to move on from RJ Barrett. I felt like every year we were just waiting for him to make like the next jump. He's only shooting 42% this year, so inefficiency concerns are still a thing. But trading IQ, I guess, was because they weren't going to pay him this offseason, so they wanted to get at least something in return. And OG Anunoby is a good player. But I thought last podcast I said Immanuel Quickley was the third most valuable player in the Knicks, and I thought that he should start and play more. So I don't know. It's tough. It's a business. It's tough to move on from two guys that were drafted to your team. So it's very tough, but maybe it'll be the right move.
And look, so let me jump in and provide the emotional factor from a New York Knicks fan. And by the way, leave it to Chris Driscoll to immediately tie a trade for two completely different teams back to two Celtics trade. I really, really appreciate that. The emotional factor, just as a Knicks fan, it's very difficult to work with, is like RJ Barrett and Immanuel Quickley were like the first two semblances of like our franchise, in my opinion, kind of moving forward after our whole Kristaps Porzingis situation. So like RJ, obviously, I still remember watching that draft lottery, and he was almost like a stepchild that like you fell in love with. Like I obviously wanted Ja, I obviously wanted Zion, but you kind of just dealt with the hand that you were provided. Outside of like if you're one of those insane people who thinks that Darius Garland's going to be better than RJ Barrett, but I digress on that. And so, like, he almost got complacent, like, in the sense of, hey, these two players were able to provide us, like, finally an identity. Like, we were this, I don't know, maybe kind of tough young core that was always competitive. And, we were always just one player away. And, like, even outside of, like, me, RJ kind of growing on me, like, Immanuel was, like, literally probably the first semblance that, like, I had an idea that Leon Rose kind of knew what he was doing. Like, Obi Toppin, I didn't hate the pick, obviously. I actually loved him, again, emotionally. But it was, like, the first thing of, like, hey, at least from a draft perspective, we finally have a guy that can identify talent late and kind of get positive assets out of it, which, like, if you're a monster, you can kind of look at this and say, hey, a 25th pick overall turned into a phenomenal, small forward with defense that we need. And I don't know, two great, players coming about it. So, like, from a strictly assets perspective, it is what it is. But from an emotional perspective, it was two guys that provided us an identity for a really long time. And I swear to God, if Mitchell Robinson gets traded, I'm going to have to go on vacation. I don't know when I'm going to be able to do. But so, again, emotions aside, we can kind of get into it. But that's what I'm feeling just from a love perspective of my two players.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that. So if I'm not mistaken, Mitch is out for the season, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mitch is
So
out for the season.
yeah, I knew he was out for a few months, but yeah, out for the season. I know this is the last thing you want to discuss, actually, but what do you think of Mitch? Like would a trade package include would a trade package include Mitch, or would he be like the center package where you get more assets from? That's what I'm wondering.
So it's like a sad thing, right? It's like it's almost like I don't even want to say it, but it's like the fact that he's injured probably means that he's not going to be included in a package moving forward unless there's a team that has, that's maybe young and up and coming who thinks they can get something out of him from an injury perspective, at least that he can come back after this injury. So I don't know what a package would look like. The big underlining thing that I like about this trade, though, is like we still have all of our draft assets. So we did want to make a play for a big player. We didn't really lose anything outside of that second round pick from Detroit. But like really just like kind of what I'm feeling is like it's a move that needed to happen when it did based upon IQ's contract, but it's a move that I think is setting up one that I think is too early. And that's a play for a superstar that I just don't know is out there, is available. But Chris, what are you seeing out there in terms of superstars in the trade block? Anything else? Anything that you draft pick wise you think we can make a play for?
Draft pick wise, I'm not sure. So just a couple stars that I see in the markets that I've heard from. So I know the Lakers are interested in DeJounte Murray. I've heard Zach LaVine as well. This one's interesting.
Which don't even bring that name up around me. I can't deal with another revolving door.
Okay, yeah.
So throw Zach LaVine out, but again, continue.
Okay. And there's one more player, which is probably out. He's probably out the door as well. And that's OG Anunoby's former teammate, Pascal Siakam. He's going to be traded. Yeah. So again, I don't think the Knicks are usually that doesn't happen where two teams make two completely different trades in the same season. Outside of that, there's not really many stars that I see on the market unless I'm missing someone. But
well, and then Chris too, like the only thing I can think of is like if you're a contending team, like I don't know, like a young team is probably not trying to make a move towards the end of the deadline anyways. And if our biggest assets are our draft, like I don't think that like a disgruntled star is going to be screaming and yelling at the end of the deadline to come to the Knicks. But also like I don't know. I guess what you'd look for is a team that was struggling on the verge of championship and they wanted to go for Julius Randle. I don't know. I wouldn't even condone that as my own team. But what are your thoughts on that?
I'm not sure, but Matt, what do you think about? Are there any other trades out there? Do you think the Knicks can make that would take them to the next level?
I don't know if any trades will take them to the next level. Like you said, I've seen DeJounte Murray's name like on Twitter a couple times. I don't know how much stock you can take in that. I don't know what change. Like I don't really think he changes the ceiling of the Knicks that much. But I thought that they were just going to wait until I think next free agency has a ton of stars. So I thought they were going to wait until that to make. Maybe they'll wait until that to make a move. But we'll see.
And I saw a tweet actually. I wasn't able to confirm this, but if I'm not mistaken, OG Anunoby's I think his agent is related to the Knicks president, if I'm not mistaken. So and he's an unrestricted free agent this upcoming season. So I'm sure that had to do with the fact, okay, so he's going to resign with us, so we're willing to risk getting rid of an expiring deal for like for someone who's probably going to resign with us in an ideal situation.
But that's the odd thing, right? Is no one's really talked about this. The thing that raised an eyebrow the most was the Raptors coming through. We have a lawsuit with them currently in place, and I'm sure James Dolan's not the biggest fan of scouts leaving with hard drives. So I didn't think anything. I didn't even think we'd be able to talk to them without putting lawyers involved. But I guess that was the case. So no, definitely just a little bit odd, but I guess needed to get done. But Matt, in terms of the East, do you think this shakes anything up at all, or what?
I'm not really
best
sure.
not to give me a Celtics answer, by the way.
I think the Knicks ceiling. I hate to say it, but I think their ceiling is a second round exit, and with this trade, I think it still is a second round exit. I don't see them beating like any of the top two. I don't see them beating the Celtics or the Bucks in the East. I think they could. I think they could end up being like on the second tier, like with like the Sixers and those teams, but I don't think they could get out of the second round. What do you think?
So one more thing I wanted to include about the trade. So and I've discussed I think I discussed the on-off numbers in the last podcast, and that's something I've discussed in my tech talks all the time. So the Knicks per 100 possession. So this is the players that are on the court versus off the court. The Knicks are 12.2 points per 100 possessions better with Immanuel Quickley on the courts. They were, however, I think it was negative 5 points. They were 5.2 points worse with RJ Barrett on the court versus off the court. How much is OG Anunoby going to make up for those 7 points that they just lost? Who knows? But as far as it goes for their ceiling, I don't think their ceiling or floor has moved that much. But however, I do think a trade was needed, simply because the way that their team was constructed, they weren't better than the Celtics. They weren't better than the Bucks. They weren't better than the Sixers, in my opinion. They're on the same level as Miami, but even then, if you're being objective, I have a very hard time believing that anybody would take the Knicks over the Heat in a playoff series. So maybe by chess, getting rid of the negative that you had in RJ Barrett. Even if you're attached to him, which by the way that's fine. And then adding someone with playoff experience, someone who is a great perimeter defender, maybe they can win another playoff series and maybe even give the Sixers or the Bucks or the Celtics a run for the money. Like even if you don't think they can beat them, just being able to get 10 with that is maybe something you can see there. So
you make a good point on that, where it's the net benefit with the net cost of losing Immanuel and RJ. Like the thing that probably has been infuriating Knicks fans more than anything was, funny enough, the substitutions that Tibbs has been doing with Immanuel and RJ, especially in crunch time. Like it's been hit or miss, but obviously when RJ is on the floor instead of Immanuel, especially in crunch time, it's been more of a miss than a hit. And it's not even that, he's sitting at a, net zero. It's having to hunt points when it's probably not time for an RJ Barrett who shot 0 for 6 from 3 to continue to chuck with 2 minutes left. So, like, if anything, like you'd hope that the net benefit is OG plays sound defense, gives Josh Hart a little bit of a break to play with the second unit to lock that down a little bit more. And we can just run a little bit more of a, flow offense when Julius Randle's not rearing his ugly head and button to a spin move in the post. But, I guess all of which to come. But, man, like, I don't think I've had more fun watching a lineup maybe in the last 5 years than over the last 10 games of Brunson, Randle, Hartenstein, Hart, and IQ on the floor. It was, I don't even know what the numbers are. I think I saw someone tweet out the other day that lineup within the 9 minutes they actually got to play together, they were like plus 24 and a half, and that's like Showtime Lakers. So yeah. I'll absolutely miss that. You'd hope there's just a little bit more consistency within the game, because I think Immanuel was only paying 24 minutes a game anyways. So look, you just hope the team's a little bit more consistent moving forward. But man, that spark off the bench is going to be missed.
Yeah, that's for sure. And And yeah, it should. Yeah, it's definitely going to be. Yeah, definitely going to be a shift in culture for sure. As you mentioned, RJ was drafted in 2019. So yeah, he's been there for a bit, and he signed that extension last offseason, not this past offseason, the season before that. So it was expected that he was going to be here for the next few years. But the Knicks saw something and were willing to take the risk. So. Who knows what their ceiling is going to be, not only this season but for seasons to come, because next year, if things work out and everyone's healthy, OG signs an extension, you'd have your regular rotation being Brunson, Randall, OG, Robinson, and I guess Hart probably, or I don't know who their fifth guy would be, probably Hart, or someone else that they would pick up or trade for. But yeah, it's an exciting team for sure, and I'm pretty sure that I actually said this in a group chat that John, Matt, and I are in together. If people wanted the Knicks to make like a huge splash move, but the way that I saw it was their team. This has been a team that has been extremely dysfunctional since Melo left. Let them be a good team for a couple of years first. Yeah. So let them be a good team for a couple of years, and then see. Okay, what's our okay? So we've been good for a couple of years now. Let's see what moves we can make over the hump. There's no need to rush. Just be a good team. So that's the way that I saw things there, coming from an outsider's perspective.
Yeah, no, it's almost like I finally had enough money to rent a car, and now they're taking it away from me. It's like it's so great to drive like a normal franchise has after so many years of dysfunction. It's almost just like. And I get it. Like, maybe this ends up being a net positive into the future, but at least for right now, I'm going like, why are we messing up a good thing? But the other thing too, and you keep bringing this up, actually, I want to get to this in a minute, but like the other thing too, it's like, if IQ playing as well as he has, and let's be optimistic and let's say he was going to play this good moving forward, like Brunson's still our number one. And he's always going to be our number one. DiVincenzo's is a very serviceable number two. Like, it would have been so difficult, like having to internalize, I don't know, maybe $70 million on the bench for a team that might not get past a second round, within the playoffs. So one other thing that's just kind of helping with the benefit. But Chris, the one thing I wanted to get to, which I want your thoughts on, is so the big thing that like Knicks fans are internalizing, or at least I am, it's look, we were going to have to pay Immanuel Quickley anyways at the end of the season. I thought OG, he has a player option, which if he plays as well as he should, if he plays as well as Immanuel Quickley, I thought was going to be going, he's going to ask for an extension. So the one thing I'm trying to like beat myself over the head with is how much more of an extension is OG going to get as opposed to Immanuel Quickley, and what's the net gain of an extension to OG as opposed to IQ? But again, it's bench players versus starters. But yeah, I want your thoughts on that.
Yeah. I guess simply just the facts. Maybe OG feels the need more. Quickley is a bucket getter. Like the Knicks already have two of those. So, and then you're filling the gap with one of the best, I don't want to say one of the better two-way players, but a great defensive player, and just someone that can fill a hole there. But Matt, what are your thoughts there?
He's making $18 million this year, as my associate just told me. Then $17 million next year. Yeah, but like John said, it's starters versus bench. So I think that's why, like, including RJ in this trade, like, it was time to move on, but it also could be like a salary dump type move for this extension. And I think extending OG is going to be, obviously we'll see how he fits, but I think he's going to be a really great fit in the Tibbs team. He's a great 3-and-D guy. He's I don't know, an elite defender, but he's a very great defender. He's shooting 38% from three this year. So, I think, I don't know what the numbers are going to be like. Players getting paid crazy amounts now, but we'll see. We'll see.
And then just to move up the Knicks for a second here, the Raptors have been like OG Anunoby has been in trade talks. He's like one of those players that have just been in trade talks for years. It was John Collins. Yeah, John Collins was one of those guys. I'm trying to think of other. Yeah, there's other players like that, but he hasn't been traded yet. But Miles Turner is one. Yeah, exactly. Miles Turner, and even his teammate Buddy Hield, who was traded eventually. But yeah, OG was just one of those players like people have been talking about trading for years now, and he had the ring in 2019. But and he feels like he was one of those players that that's always looking to improve. which, yeah, he's a very good player, but it's also clear the Raptors wanted to move on as well. And the Raptors aren't really in a good space either. Like I've been saying, they should click the reset. They should click the reset button for a little bit now. So, and I'm thinking they will. I think they'll trade Siakam. I don't. Yeah, the thing is, like, I don't know where who fits with the Siakam timeline, because he's a very good player. I don't know which team fits to where he would turn them from very good team into contenders.
Yeah, no, it's an odd window for the Raptors right now, right? Like it's a youth movement, and I think the Knicks trade just makes it even a little bit more cloudy. Like, I think RJ Barrett's got 4 years or maybe 3 years remaining. He's getting paid $26 million, and they got Immanuel Quickley they're gonna have to pay. So I guess like the only way that this would really make sense is if, I don't know, you think RJ shines a little bit brighter as the number one option. You think Immanuel Quickley is actually serviceable to be your starting point guard. But I mean, outside of that, just taking a look at the roster, I don't really see, a strong direction in which they're moving, unless, they actually package, Pascal Siakam for a nice haul of young talent. And then they're just, I don't know, sitting in the depths of the NBA, but building pretty strongly. I mean, it's not like that franchise has any reason to think that they're, going to be sitting in the depths for as long as other, organizations have, with how well their GM makes decisions. But I'm no Raptors guy anyway. Like, I'm not going to lie. Like, one of the side benefits of this trade for me is getting to listen to Walt Clyde Frazier pronounce Precious Achiuwa's name or come up with something about that. So, yeah, I don't know what this means for the Raptors, but Chris or Matt, can I selfishly ask if any of you are tuned into Malachi Flynn or Precious Achiuwa and the types of players they are? I have not really watched anything on them very recently.
The only thing that I really know about Malachi Flynn is that he scored 71 points in a Pro-Am game 2 summers ago, and that was on Twitter for a little bit. But I don't really know a lot about him. I'm not really huge on Precious Achiuwa. He's a 6'8" center that shoots 45%. So I don't really watch him though, so I can't really say. But he's undersized and he really can't shoot, and he's still a little inefficient. So.
President Chu is one of these guys that gets floated around as you always think he's 22. Like, it's almost like Jason Tatum was for 90 years, where you were like, oh, he's 22 plus 5 years.
Devin Booker, one of those guys too. Yeah.
Yeah, Devin Booker. Yeah, there's another one too. He's been in the NBA since I didn't even know since 2020. Like, he's you know what? He had 2 seasons averaging 9 points. I hate looking at stats, but I think Knicks fans are going to try to explain to themselves that Malachi Flynn and Precious Achiuwa are going to be net benefits, but that they'll probably just end up just riding the bench unless Thibodeau, I don't know, kills one of his players by making him play the whole game 3 nights in a row. But I digress.
Yeah. Cool. I think that's all we have for the trades. But since this is really just a Knicks episode, we talked a little bit about the All-Star game on the last podcast, where we talked about Derek White and his potential to make the All-Star game. So the Knicks have 2 All-Star candidates, and their 2 best players, Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle.
Yes.
And I just think it's interesting how it seems like Julius Randle is more of a lock than Jalen Brunson, simply because of how positioning works. John, you seem to have something. You seem to be very anxious to give your take on that. So I'll let you go.
So I'm glad you said it, because it's almost every year. So it's almost like stats wise and eye test wise, I would take, besides him having a temper tantrum probably once every 2 games, I'd take Julius Randle over Jalen Brunson. I don't want to say every day of the week, but I think he's more of an all-star lock, right? Guy's averaging almost 24 points and 10 rebounds, and yet people talk about him like he should be riding the bench. But I digress. But seemingly, Jalen Brunson is getting a lot more of the fan vote. And if you watch the games, just seeing a good Knicks point guard, it's almost like seeing a shooting star. So it's bright and shiny, and everyone loves it anyways. So I would hope and pray that they make it. I know there's a lot of great point guard talent in specifically the East. So Jalen Brunson might get the cold shoulder, but for my own mental health, I need one of them to make the All-Star game. But I guess Chris or Matt, who do you have just in terms of point guards over Brunson for the All-Star game right now?
You can go ahead, Matt.
I think Brunson should absolutely make the All-Star game. I think he's one of the best guards in the East. Like I said last episode, I think when we were talking about the 6 that could make it over Derek White, Jalen Brunson was number 1 on my list. But I think Halliburton's going to make it. Dame's going to make it. Trae Young's going to make it. Maxi's going to make it. Then Mitchell and I think Jalen Brunson are the 6. And that means Brunson will be the first Knicks point guard since I think Mark Jackson to make the All-Star game, and I think it was 1995. So that's kind of cool. But I also think Julius Randle's a lock for the All-Star game too. I think that both of them will definitely make it. Minus the first 10 games where Julius Randle forgot how to play basketball, he's been very, very good this year. If you take out those games, his stats are ridiculous. So I think they both should totally make it.
Like the opposite of RJ, right? But I digress. Chris, jump in with the point guards.
Yeah. Matt listed the exact same point guards that I did. I change my mind every day as to who I think the 2 guards should be for the East starters. I'm pretty dead set on Tyrese Halliburton. Past couple of days, like I've said, he should be the number 1 guard. Despite being pretty brutal defensively, I think he's been the best offensively. Not even close. And then after that, I'm still on the fence. It won't be Mitchell. I don't think it'll be Trae either. I'd say maybe a 3-way tie between Max. Like I don't even say 3-way tie. I think it'd be either Maxey or Dame, and then Brunson would probably be the 4th guard there. That's who I think. And then for the front courts, I think the 3 locks are Embiid, Giannis, and Tatum will be the 3 starting front courts. And then Randle. I think Randle is the 4th best front court, and I don't think anybody has an argument for 5th. After that, Jaylen Brown, Paolo Banchero, Pascal Siakam, Scotty Barnes. Those guys are contenders. But yeah, Julius Randle is 100% a lock, and I would say that Brunson is as close to a lock as he is if he's not a lock already.
Yeah, I think that Brunson should get the I think Brunson should get the starting nod. I think it should be Halliburton and Brunson.
Interesting.
Matt, you're going to have 76ers Twitter trying to firebomb your house after this, by the way. I agree with you just in being a homer as a Knicks fan. Tyrese Maxey is like the hottest thing in the NBA since whatever the last hottest thing in the NBA was. I don't even have a joke for that. But no, I think I agree with you. The more I'm looking at it, to be honest, though, is Randall might get log jammed at the forward because you got who'd you have, Matt? You had Tatum, you had Antetokounmpo. Who else do you have?
And Embiid.
Yeah. Oh, and Embiid.
Yeah. So yeah, it'll be those 3. I think it's interesting though how you said you said that Sixers Twitter would be looking to bomb our house. I'm actually more coming from my experience. I actually think that Bucks Twitter is more brutal than Sixers Twitter, especially, and not only Bucks Twitter, but Dame has some pretty brutal things as well. I'll give my friend Tim Maloney a shout out there. He's the biggest Dame fan out there. So yeah. This is probably the most controversial podcast that I've hosted so far.
They're down in Milwaukee. They got nothing to yell about because it's always cold down there anyways. But I don't care. What about Chris? I know injuries have not been the greatest thing. Could we get a Bam and a Bio slip in at the forward spot?
I don't see why not. Yeah. Okay. I mean, I think the same thing happened last year, honestly, actually, because when I first started writing for Primetime Sports Talk, one of my first articles was actually it was like my second or third article, actually, because my first article was on who the starter should be, and like my third article was on who I think the reserve should be, and Bam Adebayo wasn't even considered, but he still made it anyway over his teammate Jimmy Butler, who I didn't even bring up because he's not really playing to his best either. Like he's worse than he was in the regular season last year too, not even worse than he was in the playoffs, which I'm not expecting him to play better in the regular season than the playoffs because that's what he does. But yeah, it's an interesting spot where Bam has been the better player, I feel like. So I don't know.
Jimmy Butler has got to be is one of the most annoying players in the NBA this year. I swear to God, like this is going to be an overreaction. It's him and Bradley Beal, but at least Bradley Beal I know is going to be out for 2 to 4 weeks, every 2 to 4 weeks. Jimmy Butler is in and out of the lineup every 5 minutes, but I digress.
Yeah. All right. So, that's all we have for today. John, thanks for hopping on. John and Matt, thanks for hopping on such short notice. This was a lot of fun. I'm definitely excited to have John on more regarding the Knicks because we're definitely going to be monitoring the situation. But as always, Matt, thanks for hopping on as well. But just a couple plugs. Follow me on all my social medias. It's all at All American Hooper for all my social platforms. Take a look at my column on primetimesportstalk.com. Thanks for tuning into the All American News podcast once again. Like and subscribe. And once again, thanks, John and Matt, for hopping on.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Chris. It was a pleasure.
Go
Absolutely.
Knicks.